I'm going to be talking about a project that I worked on over a 4 year period, which was effectively completed a few months back with the publication of a special edition of the journal Popular Music History. So I hope that this talk is an interesting example of how a practical based heritage project can eventually result in publication, providing you get the right team together. The initial impetus of the project began in 2016 when, after moving to the Valley's town of Merthyr Tydfil, I realised there were many stories about the lost popular music scenes of the past emerging from the local community. So via informal conversation, memories of a once thriving music scene emerged with the residents, who reminisced on narratives ranging from famous bands, iconic local musicians, to now long demolished or derelict buildings that were once places where the local community would gather to enjoy music. However, as these informal stories emerged, it also became apparent that these histories were not officially commemorated in the town or the surrounding areas. They'd technically been forgotten in terms of published material, curation, or indeed by the broader local community. The reason for this deficiency of material in towns such as Merthyr Tydfil are complicated, ranging from lack of targeted finance, the priorities of museums, the capacities of local communities to self-curate, to local history simply being considered unimportant to the official curators, publishers and writers. Issues of selected histories and institutional power are highlighted in the work of academics such as Baker, Brocken and also Tim Wall, with Bennett pointing out how popular music cultures were not traditionally regarded as heritage in the first place, with their mass-produced emphasis rendering them the antithesis of authentic cultural value as conceived in conventional heritage discourse. This comment, of course, has great resonance with Theodore Adorno, who as early as 1941 was asserting that the simplistic harmonic language of popular music, in addition to its formulaic lyrical subject content and other what he described as standardized forms, resulted in it being unworthy of serious academic study, with its inherent pseudo-individualism only giving listeners a halo of free choice, making them, the audience, forget what they listen to is already listened to for them. Adorno, of course, was commenting principally on mass-produced popular music. So what he would have thought about the authenticity of local popular music making remains to be seen. After noting the tendency of collections following established narratives of popular music histories, Sarah Baker verifies how grassroots-based collections, led and collated by local people, can provide an ongoing alternative narrative that has the capacity to be distinct from a unitary vision of the past towards one that encompasses many pasts, legitimizing the role of communities as bestowers of heritage status. Most importantly, these pasts, which can include memories and memorabilia of local people, can also be regarded as reflecting community identities, resulting in the archiver being transformed from passive curator to community facilitator, a pervasive phenomenon in the aforementioned collection. Music, of course, has long been regarded as inextricably linked to a sense of self-identity, be it from the perspective of producer or consumer. In terms of community engagement, Denora proposes a framework through which music has the capacity to provide a means that facilitates individuals to construct what she describes as virtual identities, ranging from emotional self-management to providing a way of transferring an individual's means of expression from the real physical realm to the imagined, the virtual. When considering the relationship of a listener to specific songs, Alan Moore's notion of the possessed protagonist is particularly important here, when specific songs have the potential for the listener to become the person singing the song, or the person or the people who the song is sung to. When seen through this lens, engagement with music can be seen to not only express or reinforce how a listener feels, who they are, but also who they were, and also who they want to be. I would suggest this has significant consequences when considering memories of and relationships with local music histories, is when contemplating music, musical communities reflect on at least two of these parameters simultaneously. While younger generations who don't remember firsthand the original historical events may focus on who they are and who they want to be, older members have the capacity to engage with all three, with the who we were parameter tending to be the primary focus of many historical accounts. So with these factors in mind, it's important to remember the point outlined by Simon Frith, who noted how identity is not a static phenomenon, but a mobile device that fluctuates through time and life circumstances. We remember the past through the lens of our present circumstances, be that in relation to location, mood, health, financial circumstances, so on and so forth. These constructed identities are of course also important not only for those of us remembering and partaking in history, but also for those of us who document it. Local music making and consumption has of course been addressed by the likes of Cohen, Shank, Finnegan, with Howard Becker in particular being amongst the first to challenge the notion that only well-known musicians and bands were worthy of study. The work of these academics can be seen to move beyond simply collating local popular music as heritage, towards attempting to understand the movements, creative practices, and strategic relationships of local music making. As outlined by Paranoid and Battelle, ordinary musicians are often less visible in the public eye, but also, ironically, by far the most numerous. Indeed, Paranoid and Bois describe such parameters as neither rich nor famous. They are neither stars nor great artists who are well known or celebrated. This is a situation experienced by most artists, yet it is seldom studied. This sociology of the banal, which deals with artists' works in its most mundane aspects, has for a long time had only a few proponents." End quote. Influenced by Becker, Paranoid's research into local music networks with Battelle and separately with Bois is interesting. Although these writings are mainly based on the economic and cultural capitals of local musicians, often without any historical imperative, they do describe the reality of many of the musicians included in the special edition of Popular Music History, describing them as service providers torn between a desire for autonomy and commercial necessity, who often have to play anything they're asked to play. These musicians are also noted as having a distinct skill set from their more well-known counterparts, usually working on portfolio careers when they're professional, without intermediaries such as agents and record labels, dealing more directly with the public in an ongoing local career. It could therefore be argued that this local dynamic and sense of identity are two of the factors that adds a specific nuance to the memories of local musicians when they recount stories of the past, as they are communicating a set of relationships that are not the same as that of an untouchable star to an unknown audience. For example, when reflecting on a fundraising concert his band The Villains performed to raise money for the Aberfan disaster, which claimed the lives of 126 children and 28 adults on October the 21st, 1966, drummer Stuart Davis commented, and I quote, "At the time, I did not really appreciate how big this concert would be to me, but the enormity has grown throughout the years, really. Now I feel honoured to be one of the people to be asked to perform at that concert." And here is a photo of that very concert. Within this comment, Davis is simultaneously recounting historical facts, the Aberfan disaster and the benefit concert, and an emotionally bonded identity memory in which he and his band performed as part of a grieving local community. Davis is also clearly expressing who he was, is, and to a lesser extent, who he wants to be. Someone who is known for engaging in the musical history of Merthyr Tydfil, and more specifically the event which is connected to such an iconic aspect of the town's history. The notion of being part of a community, either as a musician, curator, music industry stakeholder, or audience member, or indeed a combination of all of these things, is something all of the authors in my edited collection share, with all contributors either being born or currently living in the place of their subject matter. All of the 6 chapters focus on the lost history of local music participation, ranging from issues surrounding curated history via exhibitions and reenactments, influences of the built environment on popular music activity, impacts of popular music's past on the community, to the ways in which changing relationships with local music venues reflect both local concerns and wider trends in popular culture. One of the 3 chapters concentrated on South Wales. My own chapter focuses on the analysis of a 1-month local music exhibition curated in 2018 in an earlier connected project which was implemented as part of the annual Being Human Festival, funded by the Arts Humanity Research Council and the British Academy. Although the Merthyr Tydfil based exhibition that you can see here could be regarded as following in the footsteps of a tried and tested method of curating and exhibiting popular music narratives in public spaces, the week-long Being Human activities use memory collection and enactment activities to both depict and help understand how local popular music histories can resonate not only with the participants who witnessed them, but also a younger generation who were not born when the activities took place. Based on the data compiled from both of these activities, the essay initially presents an historical account of the development of popular music in Merthyr between 1955 and 1975. It subsequently proceeds to consider the potential impacts that undertakings such as exhibitions, memory collection, online communities, and reenactment activities can have on local communities. In closing, in addition to its impact on the academic community, it's hoped that this special edition plays a small part in encouraging governments and local authorities to reconsider the ways in which they target finance, which may in turn facilitate museums to take more risks in terms of what they officially curate. It's also hoped that the collection inspires local communities to continue self-curating their musical histories, and most importantly, publishers and media companies to carefully consider the histories they document. As indicated earlier, Adorno and those following in his tradition clearly consider popular music to be an inauthentic practice, which leads to the misguided assertion that there's no point in studying it, let alone celebrating and understanding the impacts of its history. However, as Barker and Taylor specify, although arguably all popular music can be regarded as fake to some degree, it still has the capacity to be profoundly authentic for many. Indeed, as Taylor indicated, local unmediated music that is free from commercial pressures has a particularly strong resonance on the authenticity continuum. Although many of the artists and venues discussed in this collection are not known internationally, or in some cases nationally, the tripartite relationship of artist, local community, and music industries through the lens of memory has an important resonance with what Moore describes as first and second and third person authenticity, allowing participants to understand what it is like to be themselves, so me, what it's like to be you, and also what it's like to be them, a distant other. I would suggest that the dialogical relationship between these factors, in addition to the aforementioned notions of communities considering who they are, were, and want to be, are an arguably underestimated reason why studying local music infrastructures are so important, as local music practices, whatever their historical time frame, resonate in specific ways with local communities. While local musicians usually don't need to provide any information on who they are to local audience, as they often know them personally, performing in a band does provide an extra dimension to identity, where though a performer may come from a similar locality and even a congruent daytime vocation, their identities are overtly distinct. In essence, the me being referred to is authentic and tangible, but also peppered with at least an illusion of celebrity. This is who I was, this is who I want to be. Consequently, even when singing a cover version, the you being referred to by the local musician is implicitly understood in a different way than that of a global superstar. While the performer understands what the audience may know them, the reverse is also true. The audience knows that a performer can speak into their experience in ways that a global superstar may not. When reflecting on this special edition of Popular Music History, it's apparent that in addition to authentic, alternative, and lost histories, the essays also reflect alternative and lost community identities for both musicians and audiences alike. It's important to remember that although the notion of the virtual alternative identity highlighted earlier by Denora is significant, these identities are based on real memories and, of course, remembered histories. So collections such as these provide discourse for both the academic and local music communities, of which the majority of music listeners are inevitably part of. All of the essays in this special edition suggest that although local popular music histories resonate both positively and negatively with mainstream narratives, they also have a specificity that is unique to the region. As outlined by Bennett and Rogers, the local is not sealed off from the global, but resonates in a fusion, resulting in distinctive expressions of musical life, what Sheila Whiteley describes as a local structure of feeling. This collection represents an historical snapshot of these expressions and feelings in the UK, highlighting not just music's importance as a symbolic anchor of locality, but also how the voices of musicians, audiences, critics, venues, curators, and other music industry stakeholders can form a collective identity in a series of competing narratives. Thank you very much.